Welcome everybody. My name is Matthew Smith. I'm the Managing Director at Complete Tenders, and this is our second webinar in our series. We're essentially here to help small businesses win contracts, and today we're going to be looking at helping businesses to find opportunities. Essentially, we want you to feel sort of more assured that there are opportunities out there. You know, we know that it has been quite a difficult last few months for lots of small businesses, including ours. But the public sector at large is still buying things, and there are therefore opportunities out there. You know, the key element of that is knowing where to find them. So we're going to go through that today. Firstly, let me introduce you to Marina, who's in our tender writing team, and Jenny, who is our tender search manager, and she is going to take you through some of the places to search for tenders, how to search, what are the most efficient ways of doing so, so that you're not spending lots of time and energy on things that you don't need to. And then we will sum up with you know, a summary of key items that we've talked about, and we'll sort of, you know, take any questions that you have. If you do have any questions today, if you know where the reactions button is at the bottom of the Zoom screen, there are a number of different icons there. One is called reactions, and you can click on that. And then you can raise your hand there. If I may, I will keep that hand up for, you know, until we get to a point where I can take some questions. But at any time, if you want to raise your hand, then you're more than welcome to do so. And if you can just stay on mute for the time being, that would also be lovely. Okay, so I'm going to hand you over to Jenny now, and she'll start you through the process.
Okay, thank you, Matt. The first thing, I suppose, really is to understand where are these opportunities being published, and there are a few websites to be aware of. Sharon, if you could put up first a slide on the websites. Essentially, you've got some main ones that central government use. Contracts Finder and Find a Tender are the two main fundamental ones in the UK. If you are in any of the other regions, countries, Scotland has one, Wales has one, and Northern Ireland has one as well. So if you are in those locations, then do look at those in addition. I would do that as well. But the two main ones that we're going to be looking at are Contracts Finder and Find a Tender. I'm going to run through Find a Tender as the primary one, largely because Find a Tender and Contracts Finder look almost identical. And Find a Tender is slightly trickier, but only slightly. So let me just share my screen. And first things first, literally how you're going to find a Tender. Very simple, put it into Google, obviously. But it's worth bearing in mind that you may see in the listings a whole load of different options. Find a Tender is actually this one, Find High Value Contracts in the Public Sector. You may see a number of other sponsored notices above that, around that, and you may have to pay to see those. But you're looking for the gov.uk options, and there's Contracts Finder, and this is Find a Tender. So clicking on Find a Tender, this is how it looks at the beginning. You automatically click on Start Now. This is what it's going to look like. You don't have to register or sign in at any point. I would then just click straight away on Search. largely because you can then use the website to narrow down your search, and you want to do that because you don't want to be searching through everything that is being published. And you can see here there's 144,000 notices on here, so we want to narrow it down and make it simple. So this panel on the left is what to focus on, basically. And in the middle, the first thing I do with Find a Tender is uncheck awarded contract. I'll come back to some of these other elements in a minute, but awarded contracts are those that are done. They found the supplier they want, and it's a historic piece. So you're not going to want to look at those ones when you're wanting to find a live opportunity. At the top here, you've got a search bar where you can put in key terms. You've then also got a few other things here. So notice type. I wouldn't get focused on that too much at this point. Don't get bogged down in some of this stuff. There's a common procurement vocabulary is what CPV code stands for. Again, you don't need to know any of those. It's simply terms that procurement teams use. Contract location. You may have a business that is focused on a particular area that you want to retain that regional focus. And you can use some of the search options there to narrow that down to a certain region. But actually, I would keep that blank. Sometimes they're mistagged into the area, so I wouldn't want you to miss any. And it can be useful to see what's perhaps slightly outside your area. Your boundaries may not be the same as their boundaries. You also have value here. Again, I wouldn't put too many parameters in there. You want to see everything that's out there. And then you have date range. Date range is probably the most useful piece about this. And immediately it comes up with publication date. You've got closing date as well, but I would focus on publication date. Now, why focus on that? We want those notices really that have been published most recently. You want to give yourself as much opportunity to find those, give yourself as much time as possible to respond. So those that have been published most recently are the ones you want to capture. So what I would do is go perhaps last Monday to today, just over a week's worth or a week's worth. You're not going to be searching through masses, but they're only going to be at most a week old. Most bid tenders give you a time frame to respond in, which is tops about a month, could be 3 weeks, could be a bit less. So you want to be able to get onto those as quickly as possible to make a decision as if you're going to go for it, because you want to give yourself a lot of time to be able to respond. And then I'm going to go back up here. Pipeline, future opportunity, opportunity. Pipeline and future opportunity are things that are coming down the line. They're not actually live open yet, but they'll give you a good idea of what's coming. So we want those definitely checked. And then I'm going to come back to keywords. So this is the really important bit. What criteria, what words are you going to put in there? So think about your business. There'll probably be some obvious ones. There may be some less obvious ones. And probably use quite a number to begin with. Anything that your industry is a piece of jargon that will differentiate exactly what you're looking for is what you want to add in there. I'm just going to show you what happens when you put in, if you're a cleaning company, it's going to be really obvious. You're going to want to put in cleaning, and we'll just see what comes up. So you've got 31 notices, tells you how many notices have come up. So you've got 31 options to look through, and it'll bring up cleaning that appears either in the title or in the main wording. And it may pick up some things that are not directly about cleaning, but our cleaning as a word has been used in that tender notice. So if you are a cleaning company, there are quite a number here. And you scroll all the way down and scan through, see what's there. Under each one, you'll get an idea of the buying authority. So there's one from the council. It shows you straight away, quite often, so who it is. And cleaning, obviously, it can go on. Don't forget, you've got another set there as well. And they tend to get a bit less relevant as you go on. But I would put a number of different tender options, keyword options in there. I'm going to go back to the beginning and open up one of these notices. So cleaning of communal areas. Let's have a look at that one. So immediately you see who the buyer is, Somerset County Council. And here it says contract notice. So you know that that is a live opportunity to bid for right now. Also tells you when it was published. And here we go, contracting authority, a bit more details. Who is it? This is the email of the procurement officer, which can be useful if you can't find documents or you're a bit lost. You can email them directly. We also have a portal here. I'm going to come back to portals, but that link is really important. But I'll come back to that. So here we are, the title. There's a short description of what it is. So this is going to be the first place to look to find out more information. What are they looking for? Brief information. Here you've got lots as well. So sometimes tenders are split out and you can apply for specific lots. They can be split by geography, by service type, lots of different ways. So it's always worth getting into the notice itself and seeing what those splits are. It also gives you a sense of the value here. Now, sometimes you may see it says 0 value on some. Don't be put off by that. It's literally that hasn't been picked up or it hasn't been inputted when it's been published. Sometimes the values can seem very high if they're for a framework, for instance, because they're getting a lot going through a framework, but that won't represent necessarily what your piece of that may be. And then it goes into a bit more detail here about the lots. So exactly what they are, and it's actually split it out as to what that lot is worth as well. So there's quite a lot of information given here. It also tells you how long this contract is for. So here it is, 24 months, 2 years. So you get quite a bit of information. And then I would go right to the bottom of this notice. And this applies to any notice, because the key thing you want to look at the bottom is this piece: time limit for receipt of tenders or request to participate. This is your deadline, 11th of December. It's not the condition of opening tenders. That relates to the procurement teams. It's this one here. It's an absolute. It has a time there as well. There are no extensions largely. It is absolute. If it's 12:01 and you submit it, you won't be looked at. So it's an absolutely hard deadline. And you need to give yourself time. So that's why searching on something like the publication date is really important, so that you give yourself enough time to be able to respond to that deadline. So lots of information on there to take on board. I'm just going to have another look, and we're going to do another search. I'm going to try recruitment.
Jenny?
Yeah.
What would you do if you provided more than one service and you wanted to find tenders for more than one service? How would you search that up in the search bar?
Good question. I would put in another set of search terms. It's quite simple, yeah. Whatever that other service area is, I would add those in and do that as well. And it's quite a good idea to trial out a number and see what are surfacing up the ones that you're looking for, basically. Trial a number of them. Some are going to be than others.
You might be cleaning and cleaning products, right? So
yeah, you could. You might be a specialist type of cleaning. So you might want to add in some of those specialist terms like deep cleaning, you might want to put in, or the particular types of cleaning. So you might want to add those in as well. The more angles you can look at it, the more likely you are to find it and to not miss something, basically. So here's recruitment. It's brought up 11 notices, so a few less. And it's brought up a few other things that aren't related, like photography services framework, because they've used the word recruitment. So you're always going to have a bit of that. But I wanted to just have a look at this one. So this one here says prior information notice. So this is the other main type of notice you're going to come across. This opportunity is not ready to tender for yet. You cannot try to submit a bid for this. This is the procurement team from Hertfordshire County Council saying this is coming. We're warning the market that this is coming. And more than that, we would like to understand the market a bit more because they're having what's called a market engagement. So they're putting out to the market to understand a bit better what feedback they need really to be able to put together a tender. And it looks very similar as a notice to a live contract notice. So it's something you want to be sure you're looking at the right thing. It gives you some background here of what they're looking to do. And it will also give you some information about this market engagement. Some are questionnaires, some are seminars, but they will give you some information here. And this one is about completing a questionnaire. So you've got to log into this portal, complete a questionnaire, and there is a deadline to do it. One of the reasons you might want to do this, and Matt will probably have a bit more to say about this, but one of the reasons you might want to do it is it's an opportunity to get a better understanding of what the procurement teams are actually looking for. It's also an opportunity to potentially even influence the specification in your favour. If your product or service needs to be delivered in a certain way and they're not seeing that, then it's an opportunity to tell the procurement teams that this, there could be another way of doing things. So it's worth having a look at, worth responding to, and you're not obliged to tender on that.
Just whilst you got that page there, can I just also point out that all of these tender notices are subject to the competence of the procurement officer. Forgive me if there's any procurement officers on this chat, but you can see there that there's a discrepancy in the dates. So don't take everything and anything for granted when you're reading these tender notices.
Yeah.
You've got submit a completed questionnaire by the 19th of December 2024. And that seems to be a month after the publication of the contract notice on the 19th of November 2024. So just to point out that not everything is as it seems when you're looking at these notices.
Yes. And that estimated date of a publication of contract notice is supposed to be when the actual tender is going to be published. So the process after the market engagement when they put it all together. But in fact, they just referred it to this notice. So it's of no real use. You will see ones in there that do give a date in the future of when they're expecting to publish the contract notice. Don't take those as guaranteed in any way. They could be months later after that date. So you will need to keep looking because there's no guarantee they'll be published on the day they are. In fact, it's probably fair to say they rarely are published on the day that they say they will be. And here we go, same principle. You have a portal which I touched on before. Portals are critical. This is the next step. So if you like what you see, you want to understand more, you need to find the portal. And you click on that and it looks like this. Now, there are millions of different portals. Some of them look similar, some of them look very different. Don't be put off by that. It is just the way it is. Most of them will ask you to log in and give your email address and password. And in order to do that, you have to have registered. So it's basic company information that they're asking for. So register on the site, keep a note of your login and password, perhaps on a spreadsheet, because the more you do of this, the more portals you'll be logging into. So keep a note of those. On this one, you can actually, sorry. Oh, you're cutting out a bit. Didn't hear that.
I was just, hello?
Yeah, hello?
Crack on, Marina.
I was just wondering if you are committing to anything if you register for a portal and you register interest.
No, not at all. You're not committing to anything at all. It's perfectly straightforward to do it. You're registered on there and you never submit a tender, that's absolutely fine. So feel free to register.
Just to also point out, you should never have to pay to any kind of portal in order to access public sector tender information.
No.
Anyone that's asking for a fee to do that.
At this point is. So actually with Supply Hertfordshire, they've got a tab saying tenders. You can look at current tenders without even logging in. You can just see those that are being published by Hertfordshire County Council, basically. Some aggregate and put a number of councils together on their portal, but each time you look at a tender notice, you are going to need to find that portal and click on the link. If it doesn't, sometimes they don't have a link, which is a bit frustrating. You can try and look in Contracts Finder and find the same notice. Sometimes there's duplication between Contracts Finder and Find a Tender. So if you can't find it on one, go and have a look and see if you can find the same tender on the other one and see if the link is there. And again, I'm looking, so this is current tenders. And there was that pre-market procurement one. And you can scroll through all of these. There are lots and lots on here, looking very similar to what we've seen before. Here we go. It's pre-procurement market engagement, and it says view details. So I click on view details, and here it comes with similar sort of information, when the contract starts, when it ends, all the information there. Now, the next stage is to express interest. You have to express interest to get the documentation that sits behind any tender. And you have to go through this process. You're not committing to anything. You're not obliged to then submit a tender. So don't worry about expressing interest. This is purely a stage to go through. You have to be logged in to do that. So I will briefly log us in.
Why do we need to access the documentation so early?
We need to access it so that we can see in advance kind of exactly what they're asking for to be able to make a decision as to whether that's something we want to go for. There is usually a fair amount of information that you need to see, and it'll be a sign at some point that says documents. It's giving you the deadline on this. And here it is, here's the document to be able to, you can download it, view it, and at some point it'll give you an option to submit it so that, but with any tender, you will need to get to this point to find all the documents that relate to it. Quite often there will be a lot more because this is only a market engagement. There'll be a lot more documents sitting there around the specification, the procurement timeline, etc., the type of questions. And I think that's for our next webinar, is really to help guide you as to what would make a good opportunity for you, some of those key criteria around a go, no-go decision, are what we're going to talk about in our next one. But stage one is to access all those documents, read through it all and understand what is being asked of you. That's absolutely critical. So when you get to a procurement portal, register on it, express interest, download those documents, because that will give you all the relevant information. So that is kind of like phase one, really.
Yeah, just to point out, really, you might end up registering, expressing interest, and having a password for 50 different portals. As you get more involved in tendering and exploring all of the different, all of the different avenues, every authority, every housing association will potentially use a different portal. It's an admin nightmare, but it's it becomes second nature when you kind of get involved in it, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm just going to look at some common pitfalls, I suppose. I've probably touched on a few of them. I think some obvious things, certainly on Find a Tender, is keeping this award contract checked, because then you've got loads of notice. And
let's have a look at that first one, please.
Can I just ask another question?
Yeah, nice. Yes, sorry.
I was just going to ask Jenny, is it the same for the private sector when you're searching for tenders, or is this strictly for government tenders?
This is strictly for government tenders. So anything public sector is going to be published on these websites. Private sector operates totally independently, and they have no obligation to publish centrally any opportunities they may have to win business with them. So it's much more of a sales business development role within a company to go and find those opportunities. Some sectors will have a main publishing. There are some within construction, etc. But generally speaking, it operates in its own way, and there's no obligation to centrally publish anywhere. So it does operate differently.
Hi, sorry, can I just ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Are all government tenders, are they like legally, or however you want to phrase it, do they have to be on these main websites, which, obviously you guys are talking us through? Because I don't know if historically in the past it's a massive minefield, the whole tendering game, as you know, and that smile obviously gives it away. I think everyone would agree with that one. And I think from my experience, there seem to be quite a few kind of other places which some government tenders sort of manifest themselves on. So that's why it's a bit of minefield. So I wondered if now they have to most definitely be on these main tendering portals, or whether there are still some of those historic sort of other places which no one knows where on earth to find them unless you hear via word of mouth, basically.
If I can answer that one, Jenny.
Yeah.
So there are really only two places that you ever need to go to find public sector tender opportunities. The main one is Find a Tender, which is the one that we're looking at.
Yeah.
Where legally the public sector, local authorities, housing associations, the NHS, by and large, central government, have to by law publish their tender notices on this website when the contract value is above, forgive me for getting this figure slightly incorrect, is 138,000.
Right.
Is that right, Jenny? Something like that. So around 100, in fact, it might be at the top. So if the public sector wants to buy hand grenades at £50,000, they don't have to go to tender. If they want to buy hand grenades at £150,000, they have to go to tender.
Okay.
In fact, that's actually a bad example, because the Ministry of Defence have a slightly different portal that they will use.
Yeah, see, this is what I mean by all these kind of slight, odd kind of nuances.
But yes, I fully understand that. So by and large, most of what the public sector wants to buy, they have to, by law, go to tender above that particular threshold, and they need to publish it on Find a Tender. The
Right.
Contracts Finder portal, which is very similar, is a legacy tender notice portal
Yeah.
from when we were part of Europe. And then there was OJEU, the official journal of the European Union, where we had the UK one, which was Contracts Finder, and there was the European one, which was OJEU. So you would see notices on both. Contracts Finder is still very much used, and that tends to be the lower value stuff. Okay.
Right.
But where you can see on that website, they talk about £12,000. That is no legally bound threshold. You know, again, Hertfordshire County Council don't need to go to tender for something that they want to spend £13,000 on.
Okay.
They can still choose 3 local suppliers and that kind of thing. However, it may be still in the public interest and still be that authority's policy to go to tender for anything above 10,000, 20,000, that sort of thing. But they're not legally bound to until they get to 130,000.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
I say 130,000. However, it is different for construction, because if you're building a house, you know, that costs £1 million and that kind of thing, or £500,000, the threshold for utilities, energy, and the threshold for construction is more. It is different. So again, the authorities don't need to go to tender for supply of energy services or for the supply of construction services until it's around about 450,000.
Okay.
They would still very much use Find a Tender for that.
Okay.
The only nuance that I know of that is separate to that is the Ministry of Defence, where they have a separate portal, because they don't necessarily want the purchase of hand grenades or missiles advertised in the, you know, in the greater public sphere. Okay.
Well, we'll still find some MOD stuff on.
Absolutely, you will find MOD recruitment. You'll find socks for soldiers on you know, these on Find a Tender. But you won't necessarily find, you know,
radar,
you know, tanks,
yeah, of course,
that sort of thing.
No, that's super helpful. Thanks for clarifying that. And do you know, like you mentioned, obviously the mod being one of those nuances, are you aware whether sort of frontline NHS contracts for, say, you know, within trusts like ambulance, frontline ambulance work or patient transport services, because that's kind of like the remit which we operate in, and we have found that for certain trusts like East, it is an entirely different portal, you know, which the contract is not on Contracts Finder. And that's why that kind of drove me to that question. And that's why I was kind of asking whether sort of legally, you know, where it stands with that, because it does seem to be like some of this stuff is still floating around.
Yes, and the threshold, therefore, is an important element, because if that particular NHS trust is buying something that's still only you know, is £100,000 patient transport service, then they can choose where to go and where to publish that notice.
Okay.
They are not bound to use Find a Tender, so you may still see that on you know, some of the other portals.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you.
But we work with both frontline ambulance and patient transport companies, and the tender searches are typically on Find a Tender.
Yeah, they do tend to be a bit higher value, we have found. But no, thank you, that's really helpful. Thanks.
Okay. Are there any other questions? I thought I'd just quickly show you Contracts Finder, looking very similar here. And you hit, I would always hit search, because then it takes me through to a page that looks almost identical, quite frankly, to Find a Tender. Similar, very similar process. The only difference here is it open or closed. So always check the open box, because you want the live ones, not those that have finished and closed. Again, I'd ignore most of that, and you've got the same principle here with publication date range, and then update your results, and the number will be available. There will be duplication with Find a Tender and Contracts Finder. So, and Contracts Finder tends to have those slightly lower value options. So do give it a good search as well.
Again, that we say duplication because you can see the same notice on 3, 4, 5 different portals. You know, you can see it on Contracts Finder, you can see it on Find a Tender, and again, that's because the procurement officer doesn't necessarily know where to publish that particular opportunity, or that they're covering their, covering both bases, that sort of thing. If I can also just, reinforce the importance of searching regularly, at least once a week, better twice a week, on a Tuesday and a Friday. Because as Jenny says, it is important to give yourself the maximum amount of time. If you find an opportunity that is right up your street, you want to be acting on day 2, 3 for that opportunity rather than on day 29. And, similarly, you want to be giving yourself, the most efficient way of doing this, and searching back 3 days worth of opportunities might only take 10, 15 minutes, rather than searching, 20 days worth of opportunities is going to take significantly longer. And again, you want to be giving us, doing this in the most efficient way. Another quick note on a rule of thumb on looking at contract value, where you see that 1.3 million contract value there at the Shevington High School catering tender opportunity. In order, and I know we're going to talk about this in the next webinar, but generally, you need to have a turnover that is 2 times the contract value in order for you to show the appropriate amount of financial stability to the buying authority. If half of your business, so they're happy that half of your business is with that buying organisation, but if more than 51% of your business is with that organisation, that presents too much of a risk. So if you're looking at opportunities and seeing a contract value of £100,000, you need to make sure that you've got a turnover around £200,000. That's not absolute again, and there are kind of ways to demonstrate beyond that, but sometimes that can be, a good indicator to help you sort of narrow some of these search elements down.
And can I just also add that contract value that represents potentially 2, 3, 4 years, the length of that contract. So that's not just 1 year. And okay, also, yeah, when you see it on a notice here, that is not representative potentially of the lot value. So you don't know until you look at it, they're lots, and it will be split out even further. So the value can be a bit of a misleading in a way, initially anyway.
Yeah. And also just to reflect on the private sector, again, there aren't many places where you're going to find private sector tender notices. Certainly there isn't a nice central resource like this for private sector tender notices. Again, if you're in food supplies, Tesco will go to tender for certain things. They will buy from their favourite suppliers for other things, that kind of thing. What they won't do is sort of publish it on a central notice board. So if you're looking for private sector tenders, the best advice I can give is to develop your, sort of top 50 target companies, and continue to sort of approach it from a relationship building point of view. Try to get an understanding of how that particular organisation will go to, if they go to tender, and try to get invited to that tender. Of course, with the public sector, you don't need to do that. You don't need to go and build relationships in the same way to make sure that you're on the list for being invited to tender, because like we discovered today, they are bound to advertise it to the whole of the market, because the public sector need to demonstrate to the taxpayer that they are getting best value from the whole of the market.
So sorry, can I just ask another quick question there? So I know with the tenders that government are very keen to obviously support, you know, up and growing businesses, more of the kind of sort of the smaller, even maybe medium end of the market. So obviously with that sort of general rule of thumb needing to be your turnover kind of to be roughly twice on average of what the contract value is, how that obviously there's a bit of a conflict there, because, you know, if these values are exceptionally high, you know, it kind of does slice off the vast majority of businesses, you know, who are kind of trying to get to that level. It's kind of like a chicken and an egg. You've got to get more high value tenders to actually grow the business and have that turnover. But at the same time, if you're being cut off at the root end of things, then you kind of never can kind of climb the ladder. So how does that kind of work in the general scheme of things with that government kind of aspiration to not have such a closed market?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it is conflicted. I suppose the first thing to say is we wouldn't be in business 10 years later if small businesses hadn't been able to win contracts. The second thing is, yes, the central government, or, you know, the public sector are mandated to now spend £1 in every 3 with small businesses. And they are trying their best in some respects to engage with small businesses more. But as we have found in our own experience, that some areas, some county councils, some help to grow schemes are better than others, and we're you know, we're very grateful for Hertfordshire Hearts Growth Hub, you know, and those guys for supporting us to kind of, you know, try to reach out to businesses in Hertfordshire in particular. On the turnover question, like sort of Jenny pointed out, is where you see that contract value of 1.3 million. Sometimes that might be split into different lots. It's like I said, it's again, it's not an absolute. There where there have been changes to sort of absolute, you must have a turnover of £500,000 to be able to tender for this opportunity. That is reducing significantly, and where you're a startup business or where you have less than 2 years accounts, you are now able to submit a variety of other financial stability supporting documents. For example, a 2-year cash flow forecast that kind of builds in the value of that contract into your proposed service delivery, that sort of thing. So yes, it is conflicted. There are, you know, kind of new processes in place to try to be more supportive of small businesses, but there's no getting around that some authorities still only want to do business with larger organisations. There are, however, questions, you know, that there is always a clarification window to ask about contract value and the fairness of that, and we do ask that and ask that, is this fair, and is this supportive of small businesses? You're trying to get better value from the whole of the market, but you're ruling out the majority of small businesses with this minimum turnover requirement, etc. And in most cases that you know, at least sort of highlights the issue and potentially gets the authority to change their setup. And they might, you know, usually they would split those larger contracts up into smaller, you know, manageable elements.
Yeah, and I guess for them that's probably a more prudent strategy, because it actually spreads the risk as well.
It does. but then for every one of those, there's always an organisation that
Yeah.
wants
one.
one size fits all. We want one software solution that covers all of this, and in that we want the volume efficiency of buying 10 million quid's worth of stuff rather than
that's fair enough.
100,000. Yeah.
I mean, do they look at things like projected growth? So say you've been in business for 5 years and say, the value tender is, I don't know, 400,000. And so therefore you'd need roughly 200,000. Do they look, so say you've been in business in 5 years and every single year, and they say the first year you started with 50k turnover, and then the next year it's 75, and it shows that steady growth. Do they look at things like that, even though you might not be at, say, that 200,000 at the moment? Would they look at that, say, if that was a 5-year contract, with the view that you're on that right trajectory to hit that turnover level?
That they might look at that, but before that, they would look at other options for you to demonstrate that stability. So again, one of the things that you are now able to do is provide a guarantor's letter, and you are able to submit the accounts of a guarantor company or a bank letter. So if your turnover is 100,000 and a bank is willing to guarantee you a further 100,000 as a backstop, then that would increase your potential to bid. So there are other opportunities for small businesses to demonstrate financial stability beyond just having their own financial, their own sort of existing accounts. So I've mentioned cash flow forecasting. I've mentioned a bank guarantee, a other company guarantee. So if you have another business, or you're friends with another business owner that is happy to write a letter to say they are happy to act as your guarantor, in the same way that you kind of have that for job interviews these days sometimes.
Right, okay.
Or sorry, not job interviews, but if you want to rent a flat, you quite often need to have a guarantor these days. That kind of thing. Can I just check the chat, please, because I think there's been some other questions here.
It might be worth just mentioning frameworks as a good sort of entry-level opportunity for smaller businesses as well, because they do offer opportunities to go for, once you're on a framework, which is a kind of shortlisted group of businesses that are basically given an okay, you've then got opportunities to go for smaller packages of work. So it's often an easier way to ease your way into some of the public sector work.
That's very much the case in care. Sorry, Marina. It's very, very much the case in care. Lots of care and supported living sort of contracts are managed through a framework or a dynamic purchasing system arrangement, where stage one is getting onto the framework, where you have to demonstrate an extensive amount of compliance, and then you have the opportunity to run to bid for that particular package of care or that type of supported living arrangement.
Are frameworks advertised the same way as public contract opportunities on Find a Tender and Contracts Finder?
Yes, they are. You will see them listed with everything else, and they'll say that they're a framework. So yes, they'll be in the same places. I've just noticed there's a question actually on the chat around looking at subcontracting opportunities, and that is another way to approach it. You can, as I've shown, have a look when you are on either Contracts Finder or Find a Tender. You can see awarded, so you can check that box and see the companies that have been awarded contracts. You could potentially approach them to subcontract to them, and then get some experience, at least of delivering to the public sector. So that is a way.
Can you just show us, do a search for awarded contracts, Jenny? Just show us an example.
Let's do cleaning again. Provision of building cleaning. And here it is, awarded suppliers. So if I open that up, this is actually a framework. So there'll be a lot, let me see if I can find an actual contract, there'll be a lot of names on there. Awarded by contract, King's College Trust. Tells you it's awarded, value of the contract, closing date. That's how long they're going to be doing that contract for. What it is, very similar. And then when it was awarded and the value to who it was awarded. And there is, sometimes you get their address information in there as well, but obviously you can then find that company. And if you do a search and put in I haven't put in a date range. So if I put in, for instance, a week's date range, I'll get a much narrower search option. Yeah, so I'll get far fewer there what to look at, and they're all related to cleaning. So that is another way of finding information for who's awarded. And if you've got a specific contract in mind, then put in the buyer. If you know the buyer's name, if you know there's been a contract, don't put in cleaning, put King's College, and you'll find them that way as well.
Awarded contracts, you know, what you've got here with Finder Tender and Contracts Finder is sort of very useful data, and you know it is relatively complete. Like we've said, almost all public organisations use this to publish their tender information, and therefore you've got exactly what the public sector has spent over the last 5 years on contracts. And looking at awarded contracts gives you quite a good understanding of who your competitors might be, who is winning, you know, £1 million contracts in patient transport, who is winning, you know, £50,000 school cleaning contracts, in, you know, those sorts of things. So it does give you access to a whole kind of range of information with which to make yourself stronger. And you can do a better job than those guys, then that gives you a bit more motivation to say, well, you know, we can do a better job than these guys, you know, and these guys are winning contracts. So why don't we have a crack at this? You know, if you know that you've got, go on.
It will also that notice, if you can see that the contract is going to be for 3 years, that means a new contract opportunity will be coming up in that kind of last year. So you know to keep your eye out that the University of Birmingham are going to have to start re-tendering that.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not always the case. They might roll it on a bit, but you know that that's going to be coming, so you can, you know, be prepared to get into it when it does.
Yeah. And that's what the sort of the best companies do, is they, certainly from a sales and business development point of view, they know it over the next 2 years exactly where their sales are going to be coming from, and they know when contracts are coming up for renewal. They know that their success rate from tendering is 1 in 3, so that they know for every 3 tenders that they bid for, they're going to win 1 of them, and that's the sort of the trajectory that hopefully some of you guys will be on, is knowing 3, 4, 5 years down the line what your pipeline, you know, looks like from a sales point of view, and you can grow your business through that. Let me just take a few, just make sure I've covered all these questions in the chat. So Nadja, I think we've answered the question on the, you know, for startups. If you don't have, you know, a trading history, and you don't have, you know, you haven't published your first year's accounts at Companies House yet, then you are still able to bid in most circumstances. Obviously, potentially you're not going to be bidding for the £1 million contracts just yet, but you are still, you know, able to bid. And the options for you would be to submit, like I've said, a form of guarantee, and typically a cash flow forecast that shows how you are going to manage going forward, and demonstrate your financial stability that way. Okay, so I think we covered the subcontracting thing. So minimum capital, again, ideally, the advice my accountant always gives me is that you need to have at least three months worth of cash to cover all of your costs in the bank. Obviously, for small businesses, that is sometimes, quite difficult. Your accounts need to, certainly from a turnover perspective, your revenue needs to be, as I've said, sort of 2 times the contract value in most sort of cases. Also you need to have sort of be able to demonstrate that typically your assets outweigh your liabilities, and your debtors outweigh your creditors. When authorities are looking at your financial stability, they're looking at a range of things. So that, you need to have positive accounts rather than be in the red. Is winning contracts for estimates? What is the common theme for these companies that make successful in winning, apart from complete tenders, of course? Yeah, good question. There are a number of themes, and perhaps that kind of leads me on to, sort of what next. Well, there are a lot of guides on our blog page, and we're going to be issuing some in partnership with Herts Growth Hub as well, going forwards. And there are a number of reasons why businesses win contracts. Ultimately, the public sector wants to save money, and they want to make things more efficient, and they want the best care, consideration for patients, service users, and residents. So if you can demonstrate all of those things in every question, when you're submitting a tender, then you're onto a winner. That's a sort of a very, in a nutshell, synopsis. But there are lots of tips, there are lots of techniques in terms of how to win contracts. Like I've said, there's a lot of those guides on our website. If you go to completetenders.com and look at our blog page, there is lots of advice and guidance there. I suppose the key thing is to dip your toe in the water at some stage and sort of learn from that experience and try. You've got to be in it to win it, I suppose. I think
we've got some closing slides, haven't we?
Yeah, Sharon, can you put the those slides back up? And has anybody got any more questions at this stage?
Yes, sorry. So literally with the frameworks which you mentioned, so you said it's kind of readily available in most of the places sort of on Google. So is it literally just a case of putting in a search term such as the government tender? I mean, what do you...
They're on Contracts Finder. And
they all are on there. Okay, fine.
The frameworks. So if there is, if the public sector is buying care, if it's the London Borough of Bromley buying going out to tender for a new care provision, and they're setting up a framework to do that, or a DPS, dynamic purchasing system, they will go on and use Find a Tender to do that. There isn't anywhere sort of separate where frameworks are.
Okay. Yeah.
What you can do is you can look, if you know who the framework provider is, and I don't want to confuse you, with this information, but if you know who the framework provider is, for example, Crown Commercial Services, they have a lot of frameworks. What you can do is you can go onto the Crown Commercial Services website, and you can look at their frameworks, and you can see, in Sue's case, we know that, there might be one for construction services or architectural services from Crown Commercial Services. You can see where, you know, some framework providers will tell you when that framework is running to and from. So you can see when that particular framework is coming up for renewal.
Right.
Therefore, you know, that's what you can do there. But, you know, essentially, as long as you're keeping your eye out on Find a Tender and Contracts Finder, you will find those opportunities when they come up. So Crown Commercial Services will still use Find a Tender when their tender is coming up for renewal.
Okay. So then the framework, will that be highlighted within the bid opportunity?
Yeah, it's usually quite often in the title.
Right. Okay. Okay.
It's in the description. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I've just got the last question here. For startups, would you recommend dom care rather than supported living, as you don't have the added burden to find a property? It seems like some companies start blah, blah, blah. So supported living can be two elements, one of which is the accommodation provision, and the other is the supported living service. For example, the waking nights or the day services, where you are going into a residence property or a care home to provide that supported living service. Obviously, with supported living, you're covering things like tenancy management, you know, how to support a service user to becoming independent. Whereas obviously for straightforward dom care, you know, you're obviously, you know, helping an elderly person or a child with just you know, their life. I guess I wouldn't recommend. I haven't worked in home care or supported living. I wouldn't recommend one over the other. And you know, that's a sort of a business decision that you would need to make, and where your skill sets are. From the contracting point of view, home care can be easier to get into, you know, sort of standard home care, but similar, you know, so that can be the best place to start, because there are frameworks for home care, but then, you know, likewise there are opportunities for supported living. I suppose the advice that I can give is have a look at both and look at the specifications, express interest, have a look at the specifications for both of those type of opportunity, and work out which one, you know, kind of suits you. From the number of contracts and the amount of spend, and the chances for small businesses, I would probably err on the side of home care to start with, and then get involved in supported living. But that's not to say that you can't look at it from the other way around.
Just from another perspective, in terms of the searching I do, because I do quite a bit of searching around home care and supported living, one thing to think about is that actually the trend seems to be slightly away from providing care in the home in terms of the tenders I'm seeing more of, and more about care in a community setting, well-being, re-ablement, and a lot around supported living. And it's not always about providing that accommodation. So as Matt says, you need to delve into it to see where it splits between actually service provision and accommodation. But there does seem to be a sort of move far more towards that from a public sector perspective than pure home care. It's still out there. It's all still being procured, but it's just in terms of what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Okay. Common pitfalls. So as we've mentioned, don't eliminate opportunities based on the contract value. Do delve into them and see what the opportunities are to get more an understanding. Don't look purely at the tender name or that title. That can be really misleading sometimes. Do delve into at least the short description to understand whether it really is going to be something that's worthwhile. And then you'll need to get all that information that sits behind that. So do log into the portals, get that information to be able to decide whether this is a go, no go. And the deadline is the deadline. There is no way around that. That is absolute. So if you want to get it, you need to be inside that deadline. Okay. Is there another slide there?
Might be a
Yep.
summary slide. So if I summarize, effectively we've shown you kind of where to go, and there will be a video of this webinar that we'll send out to everybody, of course. And essentially it's Find a Tender and Contract Finder. We highlighted the importance of checking regularly so that you're not missing out on key opportunities, and you're developing a process to make sure that you've got the maximum amount of chance to win, because you're giving yourself the maximum amount of time to prepare something properly. We've looked at some of the search criteria, the date ranges, that sort of thing, and some of the key kind of areas around where the thresholds are, and contract values, and the other criteria. Again, all of this information is available on our website, and if you look at our blog page in particular, there's lots of guides, and also tools to help you there. And we will be doing another webinar in the new year, which will be looking at the next stage, which is, once you've found the documents, how do you make a good decision to bid? So overall, I think really the purpose of this was just to sort of highlight to as many small businesses as we can that there are opportunities out there. The public sector is publishing them every single day, and the 20,000 notices that are out there today will be there tomorrow, and they'll be slightly different, and the next day and the next day. So I hope you guys are sort of will benefit from that information and feel motivated to go out there and have a look at those opportunities. And please ask for help. Call us when you need to. Our team is always happy to advise and guide you on finding those opportunities and winning contracts.